Good morning, everyone. Andrew Kercher from Port Huron Museums. Back with another one of our little walks we've been doing. Evidently, these are pretty popular because I literally just got a message, somebody asking me, hey, where are you going to be today? So we are in a neighborhood that, I'll be honest, this is one that I have not actually spent a ton of time in. So I'm actually excited to get somewhere that I haven't really been or spent a whole lot of time in before. So we are at the corner of 15th and Nelson, and to give you a little bit of a weather report, I'm no meteorologist, but it's kind of dreary out. They can feel some drops of rain on the brim of my hat. But it's a nice temperature out. It's not cold or anything like that, so it's a good day to still get some fresh air if you really want. All right, so like I said, let's flip my camera around here. We are at the corner of 15th and Nelson. So there's a big expanse here of neighborhood that goes on for several blocks in all directions with a good mix of different types of homes, and maybe we'll walk through the neighborhood a little bit, but I want to talk about a couple of the really interesting buildings that are over in this neighborhood and a little bit about the history of them. So if you haven't been down this neighborhood, we're right off of Water Street. Most people have been down Water Street. If you haven't been down 15th, you'll recognize where we are, maybe a little towards a block or two later of our walk. We don't actually have very far to go today. But we are at the Harrison Center. Maybe we'll go all the way around the building, or buildings. So the Harrison Center, which used to be Harrison Elementary School, has a really kind of neat history because this is the building of Theseus. So in addition to my background in history, when I was an undergrad, I took a lot of philosophy classes. I really liked philosophy. I liked thinking about stuff. It's maybe not the most useful, but there was something called the Ship of Theseus, and they talk about this in philosophy classes. You might have heard of something like it. The idea is, if you've got a ship and you replace a worn out plank on the ship with a new plank, does that mean it's the same ship? Well, most people would say yes. Well, what if you replace 2 planks or 3 planks or the mast or the oars? And what happens if you if you save all of the old pieces and put them back together? Which is the original ship? And so they called this the Ship of Theseus, and it's the idea of, like, at what point is something the same? Does that make sense? Anyway, this is relevant to this building, I promise. So this building, Harrison here, is kind of like the building of Theseus because they've replaced almost every single part. In fact, the original building was built in 1885. And you don't have to be an architectural historian. None of this looks like it was built in 1885. Good morning, Todd. So, in fact, the original structure to what this building started as is completely gone. So that's, again, how you get to this building of Theseus problem. So it's one of a series of elementary schools. Let me know if you went here. Throw that up in the comments. And today it serves as, I think, a GED center. They might have some other types of classrooms in here. I think the robotics team might meet here. We've, at the museum, worked a little bit with the robotics team, and I got to come here and see all of the cool things. They were using a couple classrooms as a workshop. All right, so Brittany, she went here in 5th grade. So we are looking, the part of the building we're at now, we'll maybe walk all the way around the building because our other stop isn't far at all. There's not a whole lot to look at here. It's very institutional, but I can give you a little bit of history of the building. The other wing, the older wing of what's left, was built in 1925, whereas this wing we're looking at went up in like 1975, 1976. And again, the original portion at that time was demolished. So we don't have any of that very original 1880s portion, but I imagine it looked pretty similar to the school we were at the other day. it would look a whole lot like the Tyler School or Monroe School over in the north end of town. Now you can tell there's some other homes here as well, a lot of smaller homes, a little bit more densely packed in this area, and a lot of that has to do with some of the factories that are around here as well, because they wanted to really pack in a lot of the workers at that factory. So my grandma comments that my great-grandma lived in this neighborhood. I know quite a few members of my family lived here. My grandparents went to Harrison School. Like I said, I just never lived in this neighborhood, so it's one that I haven't spent a whole lot of time in. All right, so now we can see we're back to the back of the building here. Again, it's kind of like institutional brick, the 70s. It's pretty plain Jane. Excuse me, but now we can see the 1925 edition. You know, one of the things that you notice a lot on buildings, especially in the 70s, is they update heating and cooling, like HVAC systems. The need for big windows really goes away. You still see sometimes big windows in the 20s, even though, you know, by the time this was built in the 1920s, it was certainly built with electricity in mind, whereas the 1885 building was definitely built without electricity. There wasn't even a power plant in town until 1886. But you still need those windows to let in fresh air, as every person who's been in elementary school in like May or June knows it can be really, really hot out and nobody wants to do any school work at all. There is a cool playground here. I would also like to point out, they say the expression, you know, it's a beautiful day if you're a duck. It would seem that these ducks agree, oh, it's just living right under the slide. So Mr. and Mrs. Duck there are really enjoying the weather and Harrison Playground as well. Hi, ducks. So now we've kind of made it back. Again, this is now a testing center, but you can really pretty clearly see the difference between the 70s edition and the 1920s edition. And my guess would be some of this has been updated and changed as well. Again, you don't need to be like an architectural historian to take a pretty good guess that like those used to be windows of some kind. That would be certainly my guess. Why they got bricked up is anybody's guess. You know, they probably changed something with the inside of the building. Might have had to do with that HVAC system as well. Clearly new windows, got nice mirrored glass here as well. Hi everyone. All right, so we've made it all the way around the building, and now I want to walk again about one more block up. See, now here's another little kind of recessed work of the brick, but I don't think that replaced anything. I think that was decorative from the very beginning. All right, so we're gonna walk, like I said, another block up, because I want to talk about another business. Now, I mentioned that a lot of the homes in this area are a little bit closer together. They're a little more dense than you would have seen in the 19th century, because a lot of these were built into the 20th century. Not all of them. Like I said, the school was here in 1885. But you see a lot of the buildings being put in because we're by two pretty sizable factories. We are by what is today Domtar, and we're also just a few blocks away from Mueller Brass, which came into the area in 1917 and is still one of the area's like really big and important employers. So a lot of 1-story, 1.5-story homes. Kind of, I guess you could say some of these are kind of like a Cape Cod design. Here's two things that I'll point out. So here's your like your word of the day. So see where this roof has kind of clipped a corner off right there, and there's that little triangle on the edge right below my finger here. That's called a jerkin head. So if you ever need to know that, don't know when it would come up, that one's got two of them. The two corners on that cross cable there are clipped off. And there's another good kind of roof here to talk about. You know, a lot of these roofs we see a gable at the end. Over here, this house has a hipped roof. So it's a little bit lower profile and doesn't have that sharp, triangular gable end like you'd see at one end. Now, just like all the other neighborhoods we've kind of talked about, there were lots of little businesses and shops in here for the people of this neighborhood. Oh, I should mention, I did a little bit of research because I was not 100% sure. Just like sticking with the convention of all the other areas, Harrison School behind me was named for Benjamin Harrison. So we've had two presidents with the last name Harrison. We talked about one of them yesterday, but he was only president for 30 days. Now, his grandson, Benjamin Harrison, did serve a full term from 1888 until 1892. So right around the time that the school was built. Maybe they reference both of them. I couldn't find anything right from the 1880s to talk about that, but they do kind of mention at least a couple articles that they say like, oh, it's Benjamin Harrison. Both are pretty obscure guys. Benjamin Harrison is probably most memorable for being the president who is in the Grover Cleveland sandwich. So Grover Cleveland is the president who served 2 terms, but not back to back. Served 4 years, lost to Benjamin Harrison, and then came back and won 4 years after that. Benjamin Harrison was also the president who was in charge of the White House when it got electricity, and he was actually very scared of electricity. So there's a lot of funny stories about him sitting in rooms in the dark waiting for a servant to walk by, and he'd be like, "Can you come please turn the lights on? I don't want it to be dark." So that's Harrison School. All right. So now we've walked over to the other thing I want to talk about, the other kind of industrial complex over here. I want to talk about Domtar. Today it's Domtar. Used to be called E.B. Eddy. Used to be called Port Huron Paper Company, and before that Port Huron Paper and Sulfite. This is one of the oldest businesses or industries, I should say, here in town, going all the way back to 1888. So right around the same time they built the school back there just a couple of blocks away. Now, it was built in 1888 as like the Michigan Sulfite Fiber Company, and they make paper. And generally when you make paper, you've got your pulp, ground up trees, which you're turning into that paper. You need to process that quite a bit. I'll make sure there are no trains coming. There are not. So you need to process that pulp with sulfite, which comes from sulfur, and it gets rid of the resins and some of the sugars in there. It becomes Port Huron Paper in 1910. It merged as Port Huron Paper and Sulfur in 1916. And by the 1950s, they actually don't make the pulp here anymore. But you can imagine why this would be a very attractive area for a paper company. Oh, there's a very pretty bird. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's flying right over there. You guys can probably imagine there's 2 major resources you need when you're making paper. You need lots of wood, and you need lots of water. And what does the thumb have? Lots of wood. What does Port Huron have? Lots of water. They're right here on the Black River, and so it gives them ample access to all of those resources. So it continues to operate today. In fact, my uncle works there, my grandpa worked there, my mom worked there, so I've got quite a bit of a family history dying. Someone's enjoying the water out there. They seem pretty socially distant. They are, well, more than 6 feet away from me, that's for sure. And I'm sure that my grandfather is walking, could talk about this place for a couple hours and point out all the different buildings. There's quite a few different machines that are there that can make some different grades of paper. I know they made a lot of cheeseburger paper, and they make a lot of paper to wrap things like medical supplies. So they are going full bore still right now. Now the rail line here, we all think about the rail bridge that's downtown by the yacht club, but this is actually the other railroad bridge that's this one was put in 1929. And this rail line, actually, if the bridge were down, you were on a train, and you took this all the way to the end of the line, you'd wind up down by the lighthouse at Dunn Paper, the other paper factory in town. Again, they weren't the only people to see that wood and water made for a good place for a paper factory. So they both set up shop here in town. You know, maybe on another walk we'll go on the other side. There's not a whole lot else to see from over here. You can see some of the main buildings over there. They had some pretty big equipment, things like a Yankee dryer's kind of outdated paper technology, but it's this huge, like 40-foot tall kind of drum that they use to, well, dry out paper as part of that process. So again, you can see we are really, this is kind of the industrial heart of town. Mueller Brass is down there. They'll definitely maybe get their own whole video sometime. I really wish we had smell-o-vision. This area has a very unique smell. You can sometimes smell the paper factory. Sometimes it's maybe it comes from Mueller Brass, or maybe it's a real unique mix. So that gives you an idea of some of our industrial base. I'm sure there are people who have worked at these places and maybe think I've left out something really egregious. Throw it up in the comments. I'm sure I did. This is you know, just a simple kind of drive-by history, or walk-by history in this case, talking a little bit about some of the pieces of industry here in town. So we've looked at a school, we've looked at a couple of factories, some of the homes surrounding it, and that made for a pretty nice little jaunt. So hopefully you liked what you've seen. By this point you know the routine. If you like what you've seen, you know, like it, share it with your friends, throw up a comment, let me know what you liked, what you want to see more of. I am always taking suggestions. Obviously the low-hanging fruit of Port Huron architecture is taken, but we've got another couple of might be at this for another couple weeks, who knows. So there's lots to see still here in town before we venture off into the rest of the Blue Water area in St. Clair County. So hopefully, like I said, you've liked what you've seen. If you want to support the museum, you can always do that by picking up a membership or buying some site tickets. Right now you can get those on our website, phmuseum.org, or just Google Port Huron Museum. I promise it'll pop up right away, and we've made that pretty easy to navigate. So that about does it for today. Thanks for coming along on the walk, and until next time, remember there's history in your own backyard. All right, thanks.